signs of progress from the Chicago Bears offense at OTAs, including specific points for Justin Fields as a runner, and also just where the conversations are happening on that side of the ball, so much more advanced than the year before.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter, at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter, at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook, join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk, and make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL, and when you enter the promo code LockedOnNFL, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. On the show today, we'll check in on some of the Bears' offensive progress at OTAs. We'll hear from offensive coordinator Luke Getsy talking about Justin Fields and where they're working with him, obviously as a passer, but even more so how they can fine-tune his ability as a runner. That we already know it's special, but how can they turn it up and really maximize it in a way that's not relying on it too much without making him too robotic and corralling him too much from not using it as much as he should. We'll also hear about how just where the offense is in general is farther along and the signs that Luke Getsy looks for to see that offensive progress and where he's really noticing, okay, guys are getting in and we're really cooking with gas here now in year 2 of this system. And we'll wrap up hearing from head coach Matt Eberflus about kind of a growing trend we're seeing around the NFL of teams and players getting popped for gambling violations and the things that the Bears are doing in order to prevent their team and their players from breaking the rules, even accidentally, when it comes to what the league does and doesn't allow for players when it comes to gambling on sports or otherwise. But let's start with Justin Fields, because, of course, we know a big part of this offseason growth for him needs to be being more consistent as a passer. And certainly the emphasis has been on getting him better weapons on the receiving end of those passes so that there are fewer drops and that, of course, the players that catch them can then do more for them and that the players will be where they're supposed to be when they are supposed to be in terms of their routes so Fields can go through his progressions and just have the timing of the play better on both ends of the process. Also then improving the offensive line to give Fields more time in the pocket to let those plays develop and be a better passer, of course. That's been a big emphasis because we know he's already a really dynamic, excellent runner, perhaps arguably the best or top 2 running quarterbacks in the NFL. But just because he's already so dynamic and explosive doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement in that area of his game as well. And I thought Luke Getsy had an interesting way of talking about how the Bears are working with Fields on his running, not as a way to try and specifically make him run less, but perhaps make him run just a little bit more smarter.
Yeah, I think the running part of it, most of that is a natural thing once you're in the moment. But decision making, we're working on every single day. Timing and rhythm, we're working on every single day. So, and then lastly, the situation that you're in. And so putting that all together, you're just increasing the football IQ so that you know better when to take those opportunities and when not to. Because there's plenty of times on film that he shouldn't do it. And even though it worked out for us in the long run, there's a better decision, there's a better way. And then there's times that I could sit there and coach and say you should do this, but then his instincts tell him to do something, and we have to trust that too. So I by no means will ever make that guy robotic. I don't believe in doing that with any player, and I think that. But there's a way to refine it all and improve our decision making and trusting our timing and rhythm, and we'll take it from there.
I think it's important to keep in mind, as Getsy kind of noted there, the interconnectedness of Fields as a runner and Fields as a passer, right? They're not mutually exclusive. It's not like on a play he's either going to be, I mean, like, yes, literally, he's either going to, he can't do both, right? He can't scramble past the line of scrimmage and pass, yes. But more so, like, there's certainly the designed running plays that are part of the running game, but what Luke's talking about is designed passing plays that Fields decides to run. And the vast majority of the time, when Fields decides to take off as a scrambler, it works out very well for the Bears offense. He's so dynamic and so explosive, hard to tackle, hard to bring down, that he can take a broken play, scramble, and turn it into a touchdown. And it's the biggest part of what makes Justin Fields so special. So, of course, Luke Getsy doesn't want to limit that in any way or damper that down in any way or take that out of Justin Fields' game and try and, force him to stay in the pocket and be a pocket passing quarterback. But it is true also that there are times when the attempt to scramble isn't always the best decision. And those are the plays, typically, where he doesn't make it past the line of scrimmage. When, perhaps it's not even a bad idea that he has to get out of the pocket. I think there are times he gets out of the pocket too early, but I don't even think that's what he's meaning. But there are certain plays when Fields tries to scramble, but maybe makes the, scramble decision, okay, I'm looking for a pass, okay, now I got to run. And I'm talking already outside of the pocket, where he makes that decision too late. And there were a couple plays here and there where he gets, more or less tackled behind the line of scrimmage or right at or near the line of scrimmage for either 0 gain or maybe a 1 yard gain or a loss of yards that technically goes down as a sack. And it's these plays where, A, you could have been better off just throwing it away, but B, maybe you have to take something you see earlier in your progression that maybe you weren't in love with, but feel like you have a chance to maybe get the ball in there, but I know you hold on to it because you want to make a bigger play, or you feel like your scrambling can create a bigger play than the early quick route check down option in the progression. But if you don't make that decision, then it might not be there later on in the play when you try and come back to it. And I think that's the kind of thing that Luke Getsy is talking about refining. It's not about saying no, Fields, don't run in those situations, but it's like knowing when it's best to run and when it's best to just take what's there in the pass and when it's best to just throw it away and avoid the hit or avoid having to work your butt off to get 2 yards. At the end of the day, 2 yards is better than 0 yards or a loss, sure. But when you're running and exerting so much and risking your body in terms of the potential for a hit, even if he slides or gets out of bounds or whatever, it's a lot of work to get those 2 yards. And is it worth it in that area? Should he have just thrown the ball for 2 yards? Should he have just thrown it away? There's no hard and fast rules of okay, in these situations you should throw, and in these situations you should run. But it's just about going back through and learning from each individual one and then finding similarities in future situations, feeling out that timing and within individual plays. And it's very nuanced in the quarterbacking game that is a sign of progress in year 2, that it's not just run for your life and save whatever you can, but it's okay, well, let's be a little bit more intentional and deliberate when you need to run for your life and when we can squeeze the most out of every individual play. And maybe that means he does hold on to it more and attempt more passes and be runner a little bit less in some situations, but they still want to be able to let him loose and run as a scrambler as well. So that's sort of the fine line that you're seeing the Bears walk with Getsy and quarterbacks coach Andrew Janocko working with Justin Fields. But of course, it's not just Justin Fields that's farther along and that needs to be better in 2023. It's the offense as a whole. And it sounds like Luke Getsy is seeing and hearing the kind of things that he wants to do from his offense at this stage of the process. And we'll go a little bit more in depth on what that actually looks like in terms of guys being ahead of the game compared to where they were last year, next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at Birddogs. And Birddogs makes super comfortable shorts and pants that make you feel good and look good. I've got myself a few pairs of Birddog shorts now, and they've got a liner in there that's super comfortable. I've never been a big, tight boxer briefs kind of guy where it's, gets all up in your business down there. I've always been a boxer guy to kind of let it air and hang out. But the linings in Birddogs are just enough without being too much. They're comfort, but they're not constricting. They're aerated. They certainly also have anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. And the shorts are just comfortable. They're sculpted and designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and your leg, giving you more of that tight-knit look. And they fit better than regular shorts that are made of more stiff, restricting cotton. The Birddogs fix this issue by inventing their own cloud knit fabric that can even look, they've got khaki shorts that look just like khaki shorts, but they're the same comfortable materials as even their non-khaki shorts. They're really great products. And I got to say, once I started wearing them, they're really fun and hard to take off because they're comfortable. I could wear them every single day. You got to try them for yourself. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonnfl and enter in our promo code LockedOnNFL for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnfl to get your free Yeti-style tumbler. When you put them on, you won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. The Chicago Bears offense needs to be ahead of where it was last season at this stage of the process, despite some turnover at a few different positions on offense. Like, it's no surprise that, yes, things are going better this year than the year before, that they're not starting from square one. You should expect that, they're not just like completely restarting from square one, that guys have a pretty good foundation, or most guys have a pretty good foundation. Some guys are catching up, and they can start to move things forward a little bit more. But I think often on the outside, we're left kind of wondering what that looks like. Right? They're not coming in, if they're coming in with, largely the same playbook. There's always tweaks and adjustments here and there, but like, the guys know the plays. From everyone that was here last year knows the plays and knows their coaches and knows their teammates. So like, what more is there? What does progress then look like? How do we see, other than just like, compared to last year, there's less to teach, but if there's less to teach, then what are you teaching? You know what I mean? What are you working? You're just drilling the same things over and over again that they already know. Like, I think for us on the outside, it can be hard to sort of pin down what exactly that looks like, especially at OTAs and offseason stuff where you're not game planning for a specific opponent. So you're not working on like, okay, here's how we're going to handle Christian Watson of the Packers, or here's how we're going to handle Justin Jefferson, or I guess those are both defensive players. Here's how we're going to handle, God, we don't have good star defensive players in the division anymore. Here's how we're going to handle Aiden Hutchinson of the Detroit Lions. Like, here's how we're going to attack Jari Alexander of the Packers. Like, it's not a defensive division as it once was. There's still some weaknesses in that regard. But regardless, without that game plan aspect of it, you're kind of going back through fundamentals and some other stuff. So how exactly do you get farther along this year than the year before? I thought Luke Getsy had some revealing answers that gave a couple of good examples of what that looks like at OTAs right now.
Oh, there's a ton. I mean, geez, you could just probably take the protection game in the beginning part of it, right? How quickly the guys are adjusting, because the defense is giving us looks that we're not preparing for, right? So usually you go into game and you're preparing for particular fronts, particular pressures, particular whatever, like, and so we're just trying to play by our rules, and we're trying to learn the reason whys and then react the way that we need to accordingly. And so those guys. Seeing how quickly they're responding from where they were last year has been really good. And then just the way that our meetings go, right? If you talk about just the conversations that we have in the meetings, as opposed to talking about, why this concept's named what it is, we're talking about the details of and diving deeper into what it is. And so, those two things are probably the two things that stand out.
The protections aspect of that is maybe most interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One, it's most critical to Justin Fields' success. It's one of the most critical things as far as making sure that they're picking up opposing pass rushers and blitzers correctly and having everybody in the same page at the same time, so that Fields does not have to be, constantly running for his life at all times on the field. But also that the person making those protection calls is now Cody Whitehair and was Sam Mustipher. And I certainly don't think that was intended in any way as some sort of veiled shot at Sam Mustipher. But you can't help but wonder if perhaps the offensive line is adjusting to protections more quickly and picking up on unprepared looks, unscouted type looks that opposing fronts are showing them, the opposing in practice, more quickly, because you have a more veteran offensive lineman playing the center position, and just, I think, a higher quality offensive lineman playing the center position compared to what it was last year. Whereas, Mustipher was, not to no fault of his own, just a less experienced, younger player. Certainly, we wanted better actual blocking quality out of him once the ball was actually snapped, but even pre-snap, like, Cody Whitehair has seen more, has encountered more, and is just perhaps in a better position to lead from that center position better than what we saw from Sam Mustipher. But the other side of that, too, is that the offensive line seems to be adjusting to these things quicker with four guys in new starting positions, two brand new players, and four players in a different spot than they were last year. Braxton Jones is the only one of these offensive linemen who was here last year and playing the same position that he was last year. Because again, left to right on your offensive line right now, it's Braxton Jones at left tackle, it's Tevin Jenkins at left guard, Cody Whitehair at center, Nate Davis at right guard, and Darnell Wright then at right tackle. So you've got a brand new right guard and right tackle that are still learning what the Bears call each protection on the field. And certainly Nate Davis has at least had some experience in this system in Tennessee, a similar offensive system, but different terminology. But it's all brand new for Darnell Wright. And I don't think Luke Getsy is saying that, okay, with the starting offensive line, all 5 guys have picked it up perfectly and they're all operating at a second-year level in the offense. No. There's certainly also a reflection of the second team offensive line, which is going to have a few more guys that are a little bit more familiar with this system. You got Larry Borum, you got Alex Leatherwood as probably your 2 backup tackles, and then on the interior, Dieter Iceland, Jatir Carter, and Lucas Patrick, like all 5 of those backup offensive linemen have been here. Plus Doug Kramer as well was a part of this team last season. So those guys know the offense, those guys know the system, and anytime they're rotating in with this offensive line, I'm sure things are going to be quicker as a process for them as well. So it's a good sign that this offensive line is coming together with some new faces and some new positions, but also enough familiarity with that group as well. I also like that the conversations that they're having at meetings is going into more detail, a better understanding of not only like what a play is supposed to be. Like last year, it's like, okay, here's the play call. That means you got to run this route, or who's ever at this wide receiver spot runs this route, who's ever at this tight end spot runs this route, and the offensive line should block this way. And it's like, it's more about making sure everybody understands the what of the play call. But I think the conversations they can have this year is more of the why. It's like, okay, well, why does this wide receiver run his route to 10 yards before making his cut, and this receiver runs it to 7 yards? And you could get into more of like the timing of like, okay, Fields' progression goes 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and so this route is shorter because that's the first read. So he needs to be able to see it sooner so the route doesn't go as deep. Whereas this route is his third read, so the receiver has more time to run the route before the quarterback's eyes are going to get there, so that route can be farther downfield. And you can start to get into a better understanding of the quarterback and the receivers and the protection and how those things all play together in the play call, so that everyone has a deeper understanding of how the play is supposed to work, and more so like why the play is supposed to work that way. And if everyone has that deeper understanding, I think there could be just a clearer communication on, if guys get put in different spots, what they're supposed to do, why they're supposed to do it, and how they're supposed to do it. So that's encouraging to me as well with where this offense is coming in. The conversations they're having are definitely in the right direction. The Bears are also having some specific conversations about a new offseason obstacle that we're seeing affect teams within the division and around the NFL when it comes to the league's gambling policy and trying to prevent them following the footsteps of the Colts and the Lions. And I guess Calvin Ridley was with the Falcons when that started happening with him. So we'll check in on how those rules work and how the Chicago Bears are approaching it with their players next on Locked On Bears. By now, when we've had multiple players from multiple teams get in trouble for violating the NFL's gambling rules, all of a sudden you start to look around and say like, okay, is this team next, or what team could be next? Where can the next ones be? Because we sort of suspect that the NFL is probably investigating multiple players at the time that have maybe already violated the rules, and they're just still investigating. Much like the situation, the most recent one is with this Colts cornerback, whose name I don't remember, who he has not been officially suspended yet, as far as I know, but it's been reported that the league is investigating, and he's admitted that, yes, I violated the rules and didn't realize it, and apologized. Like, he apologized already, but I don't think the actual punishment has been handed down yet, but it's sort of been revealed that the NFL is still gathering all the details on that, which could mean presumably that the NFL is still gathering details on other players, on other teams, and makes you wonder if, even inadvertently, if any Chicago Bears players could be a part of that process. But we're getting to the point now where enough players and teams have been popped for this that there really shouldn't be any excuse. When the rule first comes out, maybe there's some miscommunication, maybe there's some players that don't fully understand the rules, or they think it's one way, but maybe it's not the other way, or maybe they think certain things are not that big of a deal, or they misinterpret it. And maybe at first you can start to have, I don't know if benefit of the doubt's the right word, or just some leniency or some sympathy. I mean, certainly there's sympathy, but like you can start to say, okay, well, maybe it makes sense that players might not totally get the rules. But we're getting to the point now where if you're a player, you should not be gambling unless you really fully feel like you understand the rules. And really, you shouldn't be gambling much at all as an NFL player. Like your contract, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But so I was glad that Matt Eberflus was asked about how the Bears are approaching this. And I think they're handling this the right way to try and prevent any kind of issues with players on your favorite team.
Yeah, so when the one incident came up, I don't know how long ago that was, when it came up, the first incident, with a couple teams, and that came up, and we immediately talked about it the next day and went through the rules, what we're allowed to do and not to do as players. And we'll do something again next week. So next week we'll actually have an official NFL group come in. We're going to do that midweek next week, and it's one of the mandatory presentations that the NFL gives, and they're going to come in and do that. I think it's the appropriate time.
When you did the initial talk about that, is that something you lead or someone else in the building leads that conversation?
I lead it. Yeah, I lead it. Anything that comes up with that issue with players, I'm gonna lead that charge. And if obviously I elicit help throughout the building, the staff members that have expertise in that field, we'll definitely do that. Our rules guy and those types of things.
I don't know if worrisome is the right word, but how worrisome is it as a coach to have to kind of navigate this territory that's relatively new and has a lot of potholes, I guess?
Yeah, it's hard to navigate, because it's hard to control other people's actions, but all you can do is educate, and then tell them the appropriate actions they can do with certain things.
Given how much effort Matt Eberflus and the Bears now have put into, as he said, like educating the players on the rules. You can't control their behavior, but you can try and educate them on what they need to do. If any player on the Bears gets in trouble for gambling, like from this point on, there's no excuse, right? The team has clearly taken every effort. And I think Cole Kmet said separately, like the NFLPA has come out and given them information and tried to educate guys on it too. Like they have had all of the information presented to them available so that they can know what the rules are. And of course, they have all the resources available to them so that if they're in a position where they just really want to participate in some sort of betting or gambling, that they can find out the rules first and then operate within those rules once they understand them, if they really want to participate in that aspect of the game. Certainly, if it comes out that something had happened like last season that they're still investigating, okay, maybe there's an excuse still there of not knowing the rules. But like, if we find out about a Bears player who's the gambling he's done has taken place anytime after June of 2023, like the actual violation occurred at that time, not the suspension, but the violation, there'd be no excuse. Like the players have to know at this point. It's their responsibility to know the rules of the game that they play, of the sport that they play in, of the league that employs them. I don't know if it's technically, it's not really considered in their contract, but it's in the collective bargaining agreement of sorts. Like that, it is the rules, and not knowing the rules is not a valid excuse for violating them. Just like not knowing the law is not an excuse for breaking the law. Like you can't in court say, sorry, Your Honor, I didn't know the laws, and then have that be a reason why you're innocent. Like perhaps intent matters, of course, but under the rule of law, not knowing the law does not exonerate you from having broken said law. And the same is true here when it comes to this gambling policy. And I thought, Cole Kmet, I'm not going to play his comments here because there wasn't a lot to share, but like he made a couple of great points on this, that like, one, there are some intricacies of this gambling rule that aren't intuitive and straightforward. Like he said, if a player on another team, if a player like a Bears player goes to Las Vegas and goes gambling, that can be against the rules. But if a player on the Las Vegas Raiders that lives in Vegas goes to the casino, they have a different set of rules because they live and play in Las Vegas. So there are some nuances and intricacies here that a player could be confused by. I'm willing to give them some of that leeway previously, but now they've learned those intricacies. And the other thing Cole Kmet said is like, we're NFL players. Like our contracts are millions and millions of dollars. So the amount of money we would gain on, small time gambling doesn't seem financially worthwhile for the player. Like unless you're gambling millions and millions and millions of dollars, and at that point you might have a gambling problem, which would be a different issue than just violating the NFL rules as a part of this. But like if you're going and if Cole Kmet or if a Bears player was going to bet $500 on a Bears game or another game of any kind, what they're going to win a couple grand, which is like 0.0001% of their NFL salary. Like, why would it be worth for an NFL player to bet $500 here and there on a game to make chump change compared to what they're getting on their actual salaries? Like, they'd either be gambling an astronomical amount that's dangerous and potentially a gambling problem, or they have absolutely no reason to gamble. And so in theory, it shouldn't be that big of a deal for players like Chicago Bears players to not gamble on sports and not violate this gambling rules. And again, we've kind of reached the point now where from here on out, no excuses. You should know the rules. You're expected to know the rules, and it's not an excuse to say, oops, I didn't know the rules. Other players are being suspended for it. Learn the rules, or else it's your fault, and you have to live with the consequences, and no one's going to feel too sorry for you for not knowing the rules that have been clearly tried to explain to you by the team and your players association. Hopefully, we never have to talk about a Bears player and gambling throughout this as long as sports gambling exists with the NFL. Hopefully that never comes up as a problem with this Chicago Bears team, but it was good to know how the Bears are approaching it from an organizational standpoint. I think it's more important to focus on what's happening on the field. That's why we started with Justin Fields and the offensive progress in OTAs. As we get to mandatory minicamp next week, you can be sure we'll break down any and all updates we get from House Hall. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day, and we really appreciate our everydayers who are tuning in 5 days a week for your daily Bears fix. We'll keep things rolling next week and all the way through training camp, the regular season, and all year round. So that means you'll still get all of your opportunities to bear down.